All right, let's get right into this. We're looking at a story about a pretty small Quaker community out in Iowa. But, it's really about something much, much bigger. It asks this question that I think a lot of us grapple with. What do you do with the complicated, maybe even painful history of the places you call home? So we're going to see how this one group is trying to figure that out, right now, as it happens. So check out this quote. It's from the community's own historical notes, and man, it really captures a feeling, doesn't it? For generations, this is exactly what the Bear Creek meeting was. It was a symbol of their faith, a rock, a place they could always call home. It's a story they told with a lot of pride, a story of sticking it out and building something that lasts. And boom, that's the real question here, isn't it? What happens when you take those stories you've been telling for over 100 years and you suddenly look at them through a totally different lens? Well, the answer is it's complicated, it's challenging, and for the folks at Bear Creek, it's happening right now. Okay, so to really get what's changing, we have to start with the original story, the one that's been passed down for like a century and a half. This is the pioneer narrative, straight from the folks who lived it. This line right here, from a history book written back in 1914, this is the bedrock. It's absolutely foundational. It paints this picture of a blank canvas, right? An empty prairie, just waiting for people to come and build something. This single idea of an open prairie, everything else is built on top of that. And you know what? Build, they did. The first meetings were in someone's house in 1854. A year later, boom, they've got a meeting house. It was a story of faith, of really hard work, of neighbors helping neighbors. They were farming the land, raising their kids, and building this whole community from what they truly believed was nothing. This is that cherished history we're talking about.
All right, now here's where things take a turn. We're about to introduce a massive shift in how they see things. The community is starting to use a new framework to look at that exact same history, and it's making them ask some really tough, really different questions about how their home even got started.
So, this new framework is called settler colonialism. And what's super important to get here is the specific definition. This isn't just about, coming in, taking some resources, and then leaving. No, this is about replacement. It's the intention to stay for good, to create a whole new society right on top of land that was already home to someone else. And this model, it kind of breaks the whole thing down into 4 stages. First, you've got recon. That's the initial scouting of the land and the people there. Then comes the invasion, which is literally when settlers show up to take control. After that, you've got occupation, the long-term process of keeping that control. And finally, assimilation, which is basically a psychological attack to try and absorb or even erase the original culture. It's a way to put some structure on what is, let's be honest, a really messy history. And this is where it all comes to a head. Look at this. You take that foundational quote, an open prairie without a settler, which sounds so harmless, so pioneering, right? But now you reframe it. Through this new colonial lens, that same phrase becomes the description of the invasion stage. It's the beginning of occupation and displacement. We're talking about the exact same event, but seen from 2 points of view that just cannot be squared.
So, for the Bear Creek Quakers, looking at their history this way, this is not just some academic thing. Not at all. It creates a really deep internal conflict with the very heart of their faith.
Yeah, this quote from one of the members, it just nails a core Quaker idea, the testimony of integrity. And it's pretty radical when you think about it. It's this call for total consistency. What you do has to line up with what you say you believe. So, what happens if you believe in peace and justice, but you realize your community was built on a system that displaced people? I mean, what do you do with that? So, using their own faith as a guide, members started to form a spiritual critique of the whole system their ancestors were part of. They're saying, look, this system was built on stolen land and the genocide of indigenous people. It pushes things like hierarchy and competition, which go against our beliefs. They see it as a main driver of war. And they even see a direct line from that old colonial logic to modern systems of control, like mass incarceration. This is literally them holding their own history up to the light of their faith and not looking away. But here's the thing. This kind of tough self-examination, it's not totally out of the blue for them. It's really more of an evolution of a very old Quaker tradition of witnessing for peace and justice. It's something that's baked into their history. So back in the day, their most famous witness was conscientious objection to war. You had young Quaker men who would refuse to register for the draft, and they would go to prison for it because they refused to participate in the machinery of war. Well, today, some members are taking that exact same logic and applying it to now. They're basically saying, hey, if we object to the violence of war, then shouldn't we also conscientiously object to the economic and social systems, like capitalism and white supremacy, that we see as causing that violence in the first place? Okay, so after all this soul-searching, this reckoning with history and with their own faith, where do you go from there? The conversation is now shifting away from just critique and toward action. The big question is, what does repair actually look like in practice? Well, they're looking at two really big frameworks to guide them. The first is Land Back. That's a movement all about restoring indigenous sovereignty, which includes returning stewardship of the land. The second is abolition. Now, this is about dismantling what they call the carceral state. We're talking about things like militarized police and mass incarceration, and building community-based ways to create safety instead. And yeah, let's be clear, these are massive, systemic goals. So how in the world do you even start on something that huge? Well, what's so fascinating here is that we can see the answer. It's not some single grand gesture. It's all these small, deliberate steps that they're actually recording in their business minutes. For example, they're now including a land acknowledgement in their official records, recognizing the land belonged to the Iowa people. They're digging into their own faith's difficult history with Indian boarding schools. That's that testimony of integrity in action. They're donating to an organization that helps immigrants, calling it mutual aid. They're even archiving old women's meeting minutes to get a fuller, more honest picture of their own past. And I think this is really the key takeaway here. For this community, repair isn't a one-and-done thing. It is a process. It's slow, it's intentional, and it's happening in the most normal, everyday places. You know, in the quiet of a business meeting, in research projects, through conversations, and in these small decisions they're making together. And that really leaves us with a question that goes way beyond this one small meeting in Iowa, doesn't it? It's a question for any community, really. A family, a town, even a whole country. What does it actually mean to build a future that's truly, deeply honest about its past? And maybe more importantly, what could happen if we all tried?